Hello, this is Blake. I'm a comics collector, art collector, artist, and movie fan, and I do reviews. One of the new comics, and when I say new, I'm holding up my quotation fingers, that I picked up here recently. One of them was
Metal Men!
One, which I thought had just been released, but apparently it came out in December of 2019, which was before Dan DiDio, who at the time was the publisher of DC Comics, I believe, stepped down from that position. He wrote this, and let me say, I don't have a bone to pick with Dan DiDio. I don't know how much I've read of his work, but I thought this was very amateurish. So if you're going to do a new series, especially with characters that have been around for decades, they've been around forever, and I've loved the Metal Men. I mean, they just look cool, each one, gold, lead, platinum, mercury, all of them. And the art looks real. I mean, the cover it's a really cool cover, which, it kind of looks like Todd Nauck almost, but maybe a little more realistic and, not quite as cartoony. And it looks like, something that would have come out of Image way back, except I think the coloring is a little less garish and better than it was in the 90s. I buy comics for the art, so when I looked at it, I went, this looks pretty cool. And I like the characters, so I'll buy it and I'll check it out. Then I read it, and it's just, for a first issue, it's so boring. It had kind of a feel of like Alpha Flight #1, where, you have this character kind of reminiscing about the history of his team for a moment, saying everything's been disbanded or whatever. The rug has been pulled out from under them. This is kind of reminiscing, and he's having a conversation really with himself, even though there's one of his creations is kind of listening to him, but I don't think it's sentient or anything. It's just sitting there, so he's talking to a lifeless piece of metal as far as I can tell. But he's kind of reminiscing or whatever, but then nothing really happens in the story, whereas in that Alpha Flight issue, there's actually a threat that happens, and then it's a call for all of the team to get back together, even though the government funding has been pulled from them, and then they go and they fight this huge monster named Tundra, because they're Canadian. And John Byrne at least gave you a vague idea of who each team member was for Alpha Flight. Metal Men does none of that. You just know, he just mentioned some of their names, and that's it. It's as if knowing their name will tell you all you need to know about the character. But it kind of sets up the entire series. It ends with this group who was formerly a team that was paid for, basically, by the Canadian government, are now defunct, have been disbanded. They decide that even if we're not an official team anymore, we can at least stay together and try to do some good things, because there are things out there in the Marvel Universe, or in the Canadian part of the Marvel Universe, that only Alpha Flight can stand up to. And as a kid, that first issue of Alpha Flight made me want more. It got the band back together, and then it just left it open for all the stories that Byrne was going to tell afterwards. Alpha Flight had great action, great characterization. It was double-sized. It was just a great debut issue. It's, in my opinion, very underrated. The Metal Men just kind of stays in one place. It doesn't define who the characters are. It doesn't do anything. It just sits there and has a guy talking to an inanimate object. It just meanders along with the guy talking to himself, and then there's this very uninteresting few pages where this lady, whoever she is, she's going to check out this psychic metal, which makes absolutely no sense to me. And I know comics are a place to introduce concepts and that kind of thing, even if they have no bearing in reality. But I can buy the Metal Men being who they are and being able to shapeshift. I don't know, psychic metal. I'm having a problem with that. It cuts back to Will Magnus again talking to the lifeless robot, and then Gold pops up, but it's not the Gold that I'm familiar with. But he's got a little hairdo thing going, kind of like Platinum has, which she was the only one, as far as I can remember the comics I read, she was the only one that had hair. So it's really weird seeing Gold liked this because I always thought his normal form was that helmet-looking head, and I didn't think he needed to grow hair and all that, feel normal. I mean, there's pretty much, it's another comic that is just kind of downbeat, and where I'm expecting the Metal Men, who again were created in the 60s, were always kind of fun. One of my favorite comics was one of the issues that John Byrne did with in Action Comics that featured the Metal Men, and I think they fought Kimmo, and it was just a lot of fun. In this issue, there's all of these. Gold at every panel, he's looks like he's shouting, even though there's some where it's got a period at the end, and it's like the writer and the artist did get together on how the expressions were supposed to be, because he's shouting with periods instead of exclamation points. That's another small issue anyway. So apparently Gold and the other Metal Men have discovered that there is a room full of prototypes or earlier versions of the Metal Men who have been shut down or dismantled, and they're kind of going, what's going on in here? And Ronnie James Dio doesn't even take the time to establish that the Metal Men trust Will Magnus. This could have been a great way to end the first issue, because then you have, the Metal Men discovering that they are not the first Metal Men, that maybe they're just the latest version, and that they're not really individuals and they think they are. Really, it should have been more told from their point of view, and you would have gotten a bigger impact from this. But it's just not. It's very. The whole issue is kind of passive. There's got to be some action scenes. I just don't understand comics now where you'll go through the whole comic where it's just everybody standing around talking to one another. It's not any fun here. And then you have Will Magnus telling them that they're not real and they don't have real emotions, and it's just his emotions put into them. And why would you write this? There is nothing in this that makes me like, yeah, Metal Man, I want to come back for more. And then at the end, whatever it is, so whatever this new creature is that's calling for Will Magnus, the sentient psychic metal, which again, I just can't buy that premise. And there's no threat. It's just, hey, he wants to talk to Will Magnus. There's no conflict. There's nothing that's interesting about this that makes me want to pick up another issue. So yeah, I was just really disappointed in this. And and the art is still really cool, and the colors are really cool. Who did the art? Well, Michelle Delecky does the inks. Shane Davis. I guess Shane Davis must be the artist, and Dan DiDio is the writer. Okay, so I was mistaken by reading that. Okay, by reading it wrong. Shane Davis must be the penciler. Delecky is the inker. Jason Wright does the colors, and Jason Wright does a really good job here. The thing I don't understand, you have Dan DiDio. He's one of the two biggest people at DC Comics. Okay, this Jessica Chen as the editor, I have no idea who she is. I've never heard of her. And I know just because I haven't heard of her doesn't mean that she's not a big person, because she's an editor at DC Comics. But is she going to be able to tell Ronnie James Dio, hey, you need to rewrite this, or you need to make this a little more exciting, or you need to go put some action in the first issue to get people actually interested in the book if they've never heard of the Metal Men? And that's another thing. He doesn't do a good job of showing who the Metal Men are. He kind of, even when they're reminiscing about the past and what they've done, you get this really vague collage of images that it's supposed to be, ooh, look, they did the art within these little gears that was in the responsometer, which is the heart, I guess, and the inner being of the Metal Men. But they don't really show who they are. You're dropped into this and expected to know, I guess, or to have been a fan before. The art, like I said, is really good, but I question some of I don't question, I guess when you have no story, you're trying to make something out of nothing. There's the reveal, the page reveal, which is the great thing about comics, where you turn the page and then, hey, there's something. And then you see this little robot that's not moving, that's just sitting there listening, or not listening, just inanimate object that looks like a person, or has anthropomorphic characteristics to it, is just sitting there. It's not a really exciting splash page. I'm not familiar with this character, if it is a character, so I have no idea what's the big deal about making a splash page out of this. That would have been a little page for me. And I wouldn't have had him talking to a inanimate object either. The thing that I thought was the most interesting thing in the whole book was the Svengoolie ads, double page ads right in the middle of the book. Other than that, though, well, I like the plaid on the Will Magnus' suit and his pipe, and he draws Will Magnus pretty well. Shane Davis does. But again, nothing exciting at all in this issue. If I were to go, well, did I like this enough that I want to come back for more? And it would be hell no. This is horrible. They did nothing. And the writers should have been told, you need to rewrite this. You need to add stuff. You need to put a villain in there that's going to make people go, uh-oh. Or some situation where the metal men are faced with some kind of conundrum. Something that's going to make the reader interested. Make me interested. And it didn't. So, yeah, I didn't care for this one. I hope I didn't bore anyone, and I hope you'll come back for the next one. Hopefully it won't be this negative, but because I do love comics, I don't like saying bad things, but yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Guardian, Puck,
Marina,
North Star,
Aurora,
Shaman,
Snowbird,
Sasquatch.
With that John Byrne, he was a great storyteller. He still is.
Tundra.